So I got into crystal healing, and I was buying crystals from witches stores here in Woodbridge. There's one in Occoquan. Literally, there's plenty of these stores that give out or they sell these objects that we use for worship. Um, when I was doing the crystal healing, or when I got into crystal healing, um, I would use them during meditations. I would use them during healings. I would I would place them on my altar that I had. I would carry them for certain purposes. So each rock had like a certain purpose behind it. Like carnelian was used to like ward off like depression and bad energy and things like that, and negative vibes, and the all of these different I don't even want to talk about them. I don't care, because and looking back at it, it's like it's super silly. Like aventurine was used for prosperity. Like if you held on to it, like prosperity would come, like you would attract it because of the vibration of the rock. And now that I look back at it, it's like, why do we feel like we need this middle piece, like this extra thing to bring us stuff that God has already promised us? And that's where you get into that spiritual blindness of you're so focused on creation that you forget about the creator, you know? So I got really deep into crystal healings. I would have them all around my room. I would sleep with them because that's what they teach you in witchcraft, that you can put one under your bed and it will take away bad dreams, or you have to leave one in your car when you're driving, or you can have like with you in your pocket. I used to carry around a bag, and eventually I'll post some pictures and I'll talk more about it, but I used to carry like certain crystals on certain days, just for what I was trying to achieve and what I was trying to do. And I would do like these full moon rituals with the crystals, getting them charged, making sure the intentions were right on them. It was all very spiritual, but it was just very foolish. Like looking back, it's like very, very foolish. But the thing is, again, devils work to make sure whatever you're using seems to work. And that's the key word, is seems to work. So when I was using these crystal healings, I was getting confirmation with the things. Like anxiety was disappearing seemingly. My depression, I wasn't dealing with it. Safety, like there were a lot of accidents I should have been in, but I always like escaped by it. I used to have certain rocks, and even like in jewelry, crystals like diamonds or rubies, like I used to use them for like seduction. Like used to use the certain jewelry, I would charm it because of the rock, or place intentions on it for certain things. Like I had a diamond ring I used to place power on, so that like whenever I was wearing it, it was something that just attracted power to me. And this is just like part of that new age, is like if you can place an intention on something, you can make it like bring that. I got really into crystal healings, and of course when I was searching into the crystal healings, I started tripping on acid. And when I was doing acid, it like completely opened my eyes to a realm I just did not even know existed. It opened my eyes to a spiritual realm that was like, what do I even do with the information that I had? And with all of it, it just made me feel very prideful, like powerful, like there was something that I was supposed to be doing. Like I was just set apart, and I had this purpose as a light worker, and just as a star seed, or a, you know, oh my gosh, all of these things, like all these titles, all these really prideful like buildups, versus seeing myself as like who I actually was. And it just led me further and further down the rabbit hole. So I actually started studying under this guru, and we would do like live meditations. And if y'all, listen, if y'all get tired about being at church for like 3 hours, I used to be on like Zoom calls learning how to astral project. I used to be on Zoom calls learning how to like invoke spirits. We used to be on like live meditations, like on Instagram Live, trying to raise the vibration of earth, or trying to cover people in a certain thing, or trying to bring balance to this certain chakra. And it would be hundreds, like thousands of people on these lives watching and praying, or meditating, praying in the same way we kind of do. in the church, but they're dedicated. Like nobody there is complaining because everyone feels like they're getting something out of it. And it's scary to see like how dedicated I was to witchcraft. Like when there was like, they didn't do offerings necessarily, but if equipment costed money, like some of my witchcraft stuff costed a lot of money, like to get pendulums or to get certain stuff for my altar, my tarot cards. Like I never minded expending that money for the purpose of my idolatry. Like because to me it's like it served a purpose. I could see like the prosperity behind it, and I didn't care that I was like kind of like spending money, because it was all coming back to me, because I was in control and I was going to manifest it and call it back into existence. So it didn't phase any of us. So other than that, but I kept like studying under this guru lady, and again, like I started to get a little bit deeper into witchcraft. I started to look back at my roots too, and being like Hispanic, there's a lot of witchcraft in that realm. So I was like, oh, I'm just following, you know, my bloodline and my ancestors, and this is really where I'm supposed to be. This is the truth of it all, and we've just lost this knowledge because of the white man's religion and Jesus, da 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 da. And I would just kind of get into everything that I could get into. So I identified as like an eclectic witch, meaning like I didn't have a certain set of witchcraft that I practiced, but I just did all of it, or whatever felt, you know, good for me. So I got into that astral projection. That's what I was learning when Jesus snatched me out. But I got into my astral projection. I got into invoking these spirit guides. I got into tarot cards, and I got into the crystal healings. Those were probably like the main things. I used to do like Reiki healings, like online, watch those YouTube videos. The tarot cards popped up because I used to see YouTube videos with them, and I used to sit there for those tarot readings, and they're super accurate. So I was like, oh, okay. And I started doing it myself. And I remember I walked into the store to buy a set of tarot cards, and I used to like pray to the universe. I was like, you know, give me the best experience that I'm going to have, or show to me, highlight to me. And I remember those tarot cards literally like they lit up the pack that I was going to buy. Like there was a bunch on the shelf, and this pack literally like glimmered across to like show me to grab that one. And I was like, oh my gosh. So, you know, I was just like, wow, the spiritual is just following me everywhere. Yeah, demons. But so I bought that one, and I was starting to do tarot readings like all the time, literally like 24/7 all the time. And that just deepened and deepened me into this witchcraft. And mind you, the whole time that I'm going through this witchcraft, on the surface it may seem like my life's getting better, but I'm depressed, I'm traumatized, I have severe anxiety, which is why I have to be high all the time. So I was on drugs all the time. I was just so broken, but because I had this semblance of power and I could put on this like, I figured out the answers to the universe, it didn't matter. And the thing about the New Age movement, they teach a lot about there is no good or bad, there just is what is. So you can't blame like a bad thought or a bad action. You can't label things good or bad. It's not black or white. It just is what it is. And we're consistently growing. And while we don't want to ever like condemn ourselves, that just gave me freedom to be a mess, and for us to still call it beautiful, natural, and powerful. But that wasn't the case. So I got into like tarot readings, and I remember I started doing tarot readings for some of my friends. And what's scary is some of the people I was doing tarot readings for were Christians. They professed Jesus, and yet they were coming to me, and people were paying me to give them fortunes and to read their cards and things like that. And I was a big evangelist, but for like the dark side. Like I was a big person to be like, this is why you shouldn't believe in the church, this is exactly where the Bible lies. Like I was a critic. I went through everything. I had all those arguments of like, there are books missing, it's not, or how can we prove that it's infallible? Don't you guys know that this used to happen? Or Jesus was an ascended master and he used to practice this. And how do you think he did these miracles but by magic? And, you know, I went through all of that stuff, and I used to preach that to people. And I know a couple of people who kind of like moved into witchcraft off of that. So honestly, the church is very vulnerable, just because if we're not like firm in our word, it's easy for somebody who, for me, I hadn't ever read the Bible, to turn somebody just as far away as I already was. So yeah, so I got into the tarot readings, and that just brought a level of confusion to my brain that I don't think I could see until now. And I got into numerology, and that's where you see like the angel numbers like 444, 1111. Personally, I don't like even doing that in the church now, just because it just smells like witchcraft to me personally. And those are those things, those little confirmations, or it was this time, and 222 and 3344, like all of this stuff. All of these numbers had like meanings behind them, but eventually I would see the numbers everywhere, and I would start to feel the presence of whatever really runs behind those angels numbers. I would feel that presence come up when I would see them, and eventually it started making me like delusional, because it was like everything was a sign and everything was a message, and maybe this had meaning, and maybe this had meaning, and maybe this had meaning. So it really made me overly spiritual, to the point that I couldn't discern a message from anywhere. Like, it started to get really super confusing for me too. And as I was like tripping on acid and I was doing that stuff, I started mixing my witchcraft into the psychedelics, which is a big no-no for anybody who knows anything about psychedelics. You definitely don't want to enter a spiritual realm illegally, but you also don't want to enter a spiritual realm and then start playing around in that spiritual realm, which is what I was doing. But I remember learning, like, through this guru, how to invoke a spirit guide and to call on these spirits to help you and to just be around you. But really, they're familiar spirits you're invoking. And so I remember I went on an acid trip, and I did the incantation for this specific spirit. And I remember seeing that spirit, like, slide up and sit there and just watch me that whole day. And I remember feeling so comforted that it was just like, oh wow, that's my spirit guide. But looking back, I see how like heinous and literally how demonic that was. And now now it kind of scares me. I'm like, oh wow, like that was intense. But back then I was just like, oh yes, like wow, I'm covered, and I'm watched over, my ancestors, everything. La di da di da. Like, nothing seemed to bother me at all. And in the midst of all of that, I was out of work because it was the quarantine. So this was 2020. So I had nothing to do but practice witchcraft, like literally all day and night. I would burn incense. I would do automatic writing, which is like you let demons literally possess your body and write things out for you, and they'll give you messages and instructions for like rituals or things they want you to do. I used to do psychic healing, where you would ask your higher self or your spirit guide what is trapped inside of you, like what emotion or what trauma is trapped and what needs to be brought to the surface and healed. And now that I'm in the church, I see that a lot of what I was doing in witchcraft was just mimicry. Like, it was just a counterfeit version of what God already had. But I found this first. Like, the churches that I had ever been to were so ill-equipped that the only time I found like the tools of God that God was already using, but we as a church struggled to like even use the tools that God has put in front of us, that witchcraft has picked up those tools and ran with them, and people are going over there because people need help. And I just needed help, but I couldn't get that help at a church. So yeah, I got really into it, and I probably would have gone way further. I had no intentions of stopping. There was a point that I was like, I am God, I am the universe, like, because that's what they teach you in New Age. It starts out very small until you are literally just committing the sin Lucifer got kicked out of heaven for, which is just pride. It's the I will exalt myself above. I will raise myself above. And that's where I was at that point. I was like,
I control my reality. I control the universe. Like, nothing, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to submit to anyone. I am what I am.
Like, it was completely blasphemous. And I am amazed that God, like, even snatched me out of what he did. I got stuck in all of that, and I was going. But there was one kid I knew, and we had gone to high school together, and he would post about Jesus all the time. And he was the only person of hundreds of people I had on Instagram and Snapchat. He was the only person posting about Jesus. And I think I argued with him a couple times, like,
don't you know that we're gods, that Jesus stuff, da 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 da.
But he was steadfast in his faith. So he kept posting. And I remember one day he posted about, or somebody's testimony about coming out of New Age. And I remember seeing it and being like,
they're so misled. They don't even understand what they're doing. Whatever.
And I clicked on the video for like 2 seconds and I was like,
no, I'm not watching this propaganda.
So I turned it off. But the seed had already been planted, because somewhere in me, like, a doubt started to flow up. And I remember I was scrolling through Pinterest one day and I saw like a post about a pendulum being demonic. And I had a pendulum and I would use it to communicate with these spirits. And I was like, oh, what do you mean demonic? Because at that point, New Age teaches you you're practicing white magic or good magic. So I wasn't a bad witch. I never cursed anyone. I never tried to harm anybody, but it was still witchcraft. But they teach you because it's white magic and because you're a light worker, because you're using your magic for good, to raise the consciousness of the planet, to bring people to their higher state, to bring in the higher consciousness or the Christ consciousness. That's what they teach. Because I was doing that, I wasn't doing anything bad. And I knew that there were bad spirits, but I was taught in witchcraft, which is funny because sometimes in the church we forget our own authority, but in witchcraft, I was taught how to confront like unkind spirits and how to make sure they understood that this was my territory and they could not just be running about. Like I had certain spirits that would dwell in my room with me, and they would move stuff if they needed my attention, or they would like turn my lights on and off if they needed my attention, or if they needed me to do a reading at that moment. They would move stuff, or I would see them walk in my room. But I knew like if there was one that was causing like too much noise or too much distraction, I knew I could tell it to go. And they teach you that in witchcraft. So, you know, I got very, very deep into it, but I still thought I was on the right side. I thought I was on the side of the universe. Even with all the chaos that was going on in the world, they teach you that witchcraft is a solution to the chaos, putting us in like the place of Jesus, because we know that Jesus is the only solution to the chaos. But they start to place you in this place of,
you're going to be the hero of the story. You're going to be the savior.
And it builds everybody into this thing of like, I have to do something. I have to do something. And when you feel so helpless and when you see the whole world like falling apart, you're like, how can I just sit by and watch? So the devil tries to reel you in over here to be like, well, if you do this witchcraft, if you do this ritual, people will start to feel better, or they'll start to get better. But really, that's not the truth at all. It's just a distraction. And honestly, you're contributing to the state of the world.